Hey everyone, in this video we're going to come back to Ritchie's Fabulae Faciles and take a look at part 13 of the Hercules story. So this chapter is called Fourth Labor, the Erymanthian Boar. So again, if you haven't been doing this the whole time, I would encourage you to look these up, the labors of Hercules, anything you can find, even something like Wikipedia, just to get a basic understanding of what the story is. But there's a lot of other resources out there that would help you. But either way, you want to make sure that you're looking up the culture and the actual sort of story and myth of Hercules so you can really understand what is being referenced in these stories. And then once you have it, again, the first thing I always tell you is try to make sure you have the vocab under control. If you find a commentary, I know Jeffrey Stedman has a pretty good one out there that you could use to look at the vocab. Then you want to try to process the grammar, right? So if there's any grammar notes that you're stuck on, try to work your way through that. But reading the story is really the best thing you could do. So take the story, read it aloud to a partner in class or anyone you can find. Just read it, practice your pronunciation, and then if that person can read it back to you so you can practice your listening skills, that's one of the best ways to do it. And the strategy I always try to use in my classroom is what we call the read and reread. So read the story once, have someone read it back, write down any words you didn't understand or any grammar you were stuck with, go look up those words in grammar, and then read the story again. And the second time you've done it, after you've had a chance to process, learn the words that you're stuck on, try to work your way through the grammar, the second read should go a lot easier. But again, these are stories, they're meant to be read, so I'd encourage you to do that as you work your way through the Hercules story. But we're going to dive in now and just kind of see what we can make of the translation. So this chapter starts with tum. You have tum vero, iussus est Hercules, aprum quendam capere, qui illo tempore agros Erymanthios vastabat, et incolas huius regiones magno per terebat. So then, kind of truly, right, vero, so truly then. Hercules, iussus est. Here we have the perfect passive of ubere, right? He was ordered. So just you have to imply here who's ordering him. It's the king, right? So he was ordered to do something is kind of the idea. So he was ordered by Eurystheus is kind of the missing part. Capere, to capture. And it's to capture what? An oprum, which is a boar, right? A wild boar. And quendam here just means like a certain wild boar. Okay, and it's a wild boar which, qui, here's your relative clause, which at that time, illo tempore, vastabat, it was kind of laying waste or it was devastating, right? The agros Erymanthios, so the Erymanthian fields, right? The region of, the Erymanthian fields is kind of one way to think about it. And terebat, it was terrifying, meaning the boar was terrifying. Magna per, here's your adverb, greatly. So it was greatly terrifying. The incolas, there's your direct object, the inhabitants of this region, right? Huius regiones. So if you're reading this, the reason I included this picture is to really get you to understand it's not a pig. I think sometimes my students get stuck thinking there's a pig running around. That's completely different, right? Wild boars are actually pretty dangerous, and they're all over the place. You see them in Greece, Italy, the Mediterranean, but they are dangerous, right? And the story of the Erymanthian boar is it's this giant one. But I want you to kind of break that mentality before you dive into it, because if you're thinking of like a little piglet, maybe you've seen on the farm, it might be a little confusing to understand how a pig is devastating a region. It's not that, right? A wild boar is much different. And the idea is it's eating everything and kind of wrecking everything, this giant wild boar. So just kind of get that image in your mind before you keep going. But then we have the next part. And it goes, Hercules rem suscepit et in Arcadiam profectus est. Okay, so Hercules is your subject, right? He took up. So suscepit is really the verb meaning like to take up this thing, right? It's suscipio, which means to undertake. Maybe that's a better way to do it. The rem means like the thing. Again, it's one of those words that's a little tricky to translate into Latin, but it means like this labor, this endeavor, right? He undertook this thing. And profectus est. Here we have a deponent verb. So it looks passive, right? Perfect passive, but you translate it active. So he set out, right? Proficiscor. He set out in Arcadium, into Arcadia. So Arcadia is a region of Greece, which is actually what this picture is in the bottom left. I believe it's in the central Peloponnese, right, which is sort of the peninsula, if you want to think of it that way, in the bottom, the southern part of Greece. But again, it's a real place. You can look it up. But he sets off into Arcadia, okay? Then you have postquam. So after progressus est, right, after he'd set out, in silvam paulum, right, into the sort of into the woods. And actually here progressus est, you probably want to say like progressed or marched into the woods is kind of one way to do it. Paulum just means a little bit. So he'd marched sort of a little ways into the woods. Occurred, he ran into, right, occur, right? He ran into the boar. Okay, so it's saying that, he set out, and then when he had kind of progressed, that's right, kind of marched into or progressed a little ways into the woods, he runs into this boar, right? So he finds the boar that he's looking for. Then you have ille autem simulatque Herculem vide statum refugit, et timore perterritus in altam fossam se projecit. Okay, so ille here means like it. It's talking about the boar, right? So it's probably fine. So it, however, as soon as, so simulatque here really means like at the same time as is kind of one way to do it, or as soon as is probably the best way to do it. So as soon as it saw, it Hercules, right? So the boar sees Hercules, and it immediately refugit, it ran away, right? It fled. And you have timore perterritus, so it's terrified from fear, right? So perterritus here is really an adjective that means like to be, like terrified, right? And then you have the timor, right, from the fear. So it's really like overwhelmed by seeing Hercules is kind of the idea. It se projecit, right? It threw itself into an altam fossam, into a deep ditch. So kind of a funny line here, but the idea is the boar sees Hercules and understands, it's chasing him, and it decides to just, jump itself into a ditch. Kind of a funny thing. So it throws itself down a ditch, I guess, to run away from it. Okay. But now Hercules has this problem of how are you going to get the boar out of the ditch, right? So you have Hercules igitur, laqueum quem atularat in yecit, et summa cum difficultate aprum e fossa extraxit. Okay, so Hercules, therefore, right, he threw down in yecit, or he threw in a laqueum. It means like a rope, right? It could technically be a noose, but it's like, basically a rope. He threw down a noose, like a rope noose, to catch the boar, right? To wrap it around the boar is the idea. And it's a noose or a rope which quem atulerat, he had brought, right? So I guess he had thought in advance, I'll bring a rope. Not sure why you'd think you'd need one, but whatever. I guess he's trying to catch it alive. So he figured he has a rope, and it works out. He has one on hand, right? And summa cum difficultate, there we go. So with the greatest difficulty, extraxit, he dragged out, right? There's your perfect tense verb. He dragged out the aprum, the boar, a fossa, out of the ditch, right? So he throws down the rope. It kind of works its way around the boar, and then he starts dragging this thing out of the ditch because he's trying to capture it alive. Then you have ille etsi fortiter repugnabat nulla modo se liberare potuit, et ab Hercule ad Eurystheum vivus relatus est. Okay, so he, or ille, right? And I guess since you're talking about the boar, it's probably it again, right? So it, even though, so etsi here really means, like even though, right, is kind of one way to do it. So even though, or although, I guess would kind of work. Although it was fighting, repugnabat, right, it was resisting, literally fighting back. Fortiter, bravely or strongly, right? So the boar is resisting is the idea. You have nulla modo, in no way it was able, potuit, right? Se liberare, to free itself. You just have the reflexive there. So it was able to free itself in no way, meaning it couldn't get away from the rope and Hercules pulling it up, even though it does struggle, right? And relatus est, it was brought back, right? There's your passive verb, right? So it was brought back. This is refero, right? The perfect passive of refero, right? So it was brought back alive, vivus, right? Talking about the boar, by Hercules, ab Hercule. There's your ablative of agent because you have a passive voice verb. And it was brought to Eurystheus, right? Which is the king who sent, or keeps sending rather, Hercules on these labors. Okay, so this one, nothing too crazy here. It's just another example of Herc and his physical strength. He chases the boar, and when it goes down the ditch, he has to physically haul that thing out of there. So again, it's another labor involving just sort of brute strength. But otherwise, it's not anything too crazy. Particularly the way Ritchie writes, it's a pretty straightforward chapter. But hopefully, it made sense to you. There's nothing particularly crazy involving the grammar. But if there is anything, feel free to let me know. Put it in the comments. I'd be happy to help you. But otherwise, like I said, keep reading the stories aloud. Do the read and reread method, whatever it is you need to do. To make this something that you're not necessarily translating word for word, although you can do that, of course, but that it's more you're reading it, right, and letting it kind of wash over you and you're understanding it as you go. All right? Again, if you need anything, let me know, but otherwise, good luck with it.